Ethan's boots clicked against the metal grating of the corridor, a rhythm that somehow made him feel like he was in a low-budget sci-fi movie rather than a high-security alien outpost. He had been tasked with mapping storage sectors for maintenance, which in theory should have been simple. In practice, he had already gone wrong twice, once when he mistook a vacuum chute for a maintenance tunnel, and again when he somehow ended up inside a stack of hibernation pods, triggering 3 alarms before realizing they weren't automatic lights but the blinking eyes of actual sleeping aliens. Today, he told himself, would be different. Today, he would stick to the plan. And yet, curiosity, which had ruined more human careers than any hostile alien ever had, nudged him down a side corridor labeled with glowing symbols he didn't understand. The walls hummed faintly, an undertone of energy that made the hair on his arms stand on end. Each panel flickered with alien runes that pulsed like a heartbeat, and he swore he saw one blink at him, as if it had noticed his presence. He told himself it was just a trick of the lights, or maybe his imagination reacting to the recycled air of the station, but the voice in his head, the one that always warned him when he was about to get in trouble, remained suspiciously silent. At the end of the corridor, a massive door loomed, sleek metal with inlaid energy circuits that shimmered in colors he didn't have names for. Above it, a display blinked red, authorized personnel only, trespassers will be handled. His brain processed this in stages, authorized personnel, obviously not him, handled, a little vague but probably not friendly, trespassers, which technically he was. Curiosity won over caution, as it always did. He pressed the panel and it beeped twice, the second beep echoing ominously. The door slid open before him with a hiss that suggested a dragon exhaling more than a simple security mechanism. Inside, the armory stretched farther than he could see, illuminated by cold blue light that reflected off racks of weapons so alien that he half expected them to leap off the walls and attack him. Some pulsed like living creatures, others glimmered with a crystalline sheen, and a few had energy signatures that made his stomach flutter in an unsettling combination of awe and fear. He whispered under his breath, "This is insane. Why would anyone have a collection like this?" and immediately scolded himself for sounding like a tourist on a deadly vacation. Then he heard it, a voice so smooth it made his knees weaken, yet so sharp it pierced the air like a blade. "And what, pray tell, is a human doing in the armory?" He spun around and froze. Standing before him was a woman, impossibly tall, with a posture that radiated authority. Her skin had a subtle iridescence that caught the blue lights of the room, her hair was dark and glossy, and her long ears, curved elegantly back, gave her an appearance that was simultaneously familiar and otherworldly. Her eyes, a pale green with flecks of gold, scanned him like she could read not only his movements but his thoughts. I'm Ethan," he stammered, waving a hand as if that simple introduction might explain everything. "I was, checking the maintenance tunnels." He gestured vaguely behind him, as if the corridor itself might testify on his behalf. Liara, because he somehow knew that was her name without being told, raised an eyebrow and leaned slightly on the edge of a weapon rack. The weapon itself seemed to hum in recognition of her presence, responding to a touch she didn't yet give. "Maintenance tunnels," she repeated, her tone carrying a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Interesting choice. Most humans would choose to run screaming at the sight of these artifacts." Ethan laughed nervously. "Yeah, well, I'm not most humans," he said, which immediately sounded like the most ridiculous excuse in the history of excuses. "I mean, sometimes I am, but today I'm being responsible." His attempt at humor earned a faint twitch at the corner of her lips. He wasn't sure if that was amusement or warning. "You have wandered far beyond what is allowed," she said, tilting her head, the long ears twitching in a way that made her look both playful and predatory. "You are either very brave or very foolish. Which is it?" Ethan considered this. "Depends on who you ask. My mother says I'm brave. My last supervisor, well, he's no longer my supervisor." He winced, realizing that sounded more like a confession than a joke. Liara's eyes flicked toward one of the larger racks, and the weapon there shimmered with a pulse of violet energy. "You will not leave this room without consequences," she said. However, her tone shifted, softer now, like sunlight through alien glass. "Perhaps the consequence can be interesting rather than fatal." Ethan blinked. Interesting rather than fatal, that's a new one. He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the weight of the situation press against his ribs, but strangely, instead of panic, a grin crept across his face. "I think I can work with that." What? Liara's expression shifted into something dangerously close to a smile, a rare event he would later tell himself was a mistake on her part. "You will prepare a special dinner for me. It is a tradition. A test of skill, courage, and charm. Fail and your trespass is permanent. Succeed and you may leave, perhaps wiser and perhaps forgiven." Ethan stared, caught between the absurdity of what he'd just heard and the possibility that he had stumbled into the strangest adventure of his life. "A dinner?" he asked, trying to sound casual as if he had been expecting alien dining challenges all morning. "I make a mean spaghetti." Liara's ears twitched and a low, melodic laugh escaped her. "You may find that your human cuisine requires adaptation." And just like that, Ethan's heart switched from panic to bemusement. Somehow, the worst day of his life had turned into a bizarre culinary mission inside the most dangerous armory in the galaxy. He was terrified, thrilled, and slightly hungry, and he knew, somehow, that nothing about this night would be ordinary. He glanced at the racks of weapons again, imagining the plasma blasters and energy swords as if they were silently judging him for his incompetence. "Okay," he muttered to himself, "let's not blow anything up, at least not until dessert." Liara stepped closer, her presence filling the room, her long ears flicking in a rhythm that almost seemed to mimic the pulsing energy of the armory. "Follow me," she said, and without waiting for a response, she moved toward a side corridor that glowed with warmer light, a stark contrast to the cold metallic blue of the armory. Ethan hurried after her, trying not to trip over his own feet or the stray anti-gravity crates floating lazily near the floor. As they walked, Ethan couldn't resist a joke. "You know, if this dinner thing doesn't work out, I'm thinking of opening a restaurant. Intergalactic cuisine, no humans left behind." Liara's laugh, musical and teasing, echoed down the corridor. "Perhaps," she said, "but first you must survive my kitchen." Ethan swallowed, feeling the tension of the armory fade just a little under the warmth of humor and the curious sparkle in her eyes. Somehow, in a room full of the deadliest weapons in the known galaxy, he felt the first spark of hope that mistakes could sometimes lead to something extraordinary. The adventure was only beginning, and Ethan knew one thing for sure. If he survived dinner, he might just walk out not only forgiven but changed, and that thought made him grin, even as his stomach churned at the thought of alien ingredients that might bite back. Ethan followed Liara down the glowing corridor, every step echoing against the metal walls, a rhythm that somehow reminded him of a heartbeat, except a heartbeat that had a slightly sarcastic undertone. The corridor widened into a chamber that hummed with energy, a kitchen unlike any he had ever imagined. The counters floated a few inches off the floor, lights shifted in intensity depending on which tool you touched, and strange containers hovered around the room, each one glowing faintly as if aware of him. He stepped cautiously, half expecting the floating knives to dive at him. Liara's long ears twitched in amusement as she watched his careful movements. "Don't worry," she said, her voice smooth like liquid crystal. "Nothing here will attack unless provoked, and you will learn quickly what counts as provocation." Ethan nodded, trying to look confident, which only made him feel like a cartoon character tiptoeing past a sleeping dragon. "Right," he said, "provocation equals not touching everything, got it." He immediately reached for a container that had suddenly lowered itself toward him, thought better of it, and dropped his hand. The container hovered back into the air. Liara's eyes sparkled with amusement. "First rule," she said, "the kitchen responds to intention. If you think it will explode, it might politely." Ethan swallowed, imagining politely exploding. "Great, I love polite explosions." "What?" She tilted her head, letting a strand of hair fall over her shoulder. "You will prepare 3 dishes, one to show skill, one to show creativity, and one to show courage. You may ask questions, but beware. Some ingredients will react unpredictably to human logic." Ethan's eyes darted around the kitchen. Some ingredients floated like clouds of color, others shimmered with a strange bioluminescent glow. One even buzzed faintly, vibrating as if it had opinions about being picked up. "Unpredictable, got it. I'll try not to make anything sentient angry," he muttered, feeling the tension break with a joke. Liara's laugh, low and musical, filled the room. "Your humor may save you, human. Do not rely solely on it." He started cautiously, selecting ingredients that looked least likely to spark a galactic incident. As he worked, Liara moved among the floating counters like a conductor with an orchestra of chaos. She offered tips in passing, sometimes serious, sometimes sarcastic. "Balance the plasma fruit carefully," she said. "It is volatile, unlike your sense of humor, which is entirely untested." Ethan grinned, cutting a shimmering, gelatinous fruit that pulsed in response to his touch. A small spark of energy shot up, causing him to jump. "Well," he said, holding up his hands, "that was polite, right?" Liara's ears twitched. "Polite indeed, perhaps you are learning faster than expected." He laughed, which earned a soft shake of her head. The more they interacted, the more he realized that beneath her authoritative presence, Liara enjoyed these little games, and the teasing banter made the room feel less like a gauntlet and more like shared adventure. Every misstep he made, a floating utensil that spun out of control, a container that emitted a small puff of smoke when mishandled, became a moment of laughter between them, slowly eroding the fear he had felt in the armory. As they progressed, Ethan attempted a daring move, combining two ingredients that seemed wildly incompatible: a gelatinous plasma fruit and a hovering strand of crystalline spice. The mixture wavered in midair, then exploded into a rainbow mist, scattering tiny sparks across the room. Ethan coughed and waved his hands, expecting reprimand or worse. Liara's laughter rang out, clear and bright, bouncing off the walls. "You are either very brave or very foolish," she said, eyes glinting with amusement. "Perhaps both." He bowed mockingly. "I'll take both as compliments." What? She shook her head, her long ears flicking like fine instruments in rhythm with her smile. "The courage dish awaits. Are you prepared to test it?" Ethan glanced at a strange, pulsing ingredient hovering in a container that seemed to hum with awareness. "Prepared-ish," he admitted. "If it bites me, I call dibs on blaming the armory." Liara raised an eyebrow. "You may not survive on blame alone." He chuckled nervously, taking a deep breath before touching the ingredient. Immediately it flared with light, wrapping his hands in a warm glow. He could feel it respond to his heartbeat, adjusting, expanding, contracting. He had to coax it gently, whispering nonsense jokes to keep it calm. Why did the alien chef cross the nebula? To avoid dinner disasters. Liara laughed so loudly it made a small pan tip over. Ethan nearly lost his balance but kept the ingredient under control. By the end of the trial, he had managed to create a shimmering, floating dish that seemed almost alive, vibrating gently in a way that suggested satisfaction. "Impressive," Liara said, examining the result. "You survived the courage test, you handled chaos with creativity, and you somehow maintained humor throughout. Perhaps forgiveness is not impossible." Ethan exhaled, wiping his brow. "That's encouraging, I think, also terrifying." What? She stepped closer, her long ears brushing a floating utensil as she leaned slightly toward him. "You have shown adaptability and wit, qualities few humans possess when faced with the unfamiliar." He shrugged. "I have a lot of practice with unfamiliar." The room seemed to hum approval at his words, a soft vibration under the floating counters and hovering ingredients, as if the kitchen itself had acknowledged his survival. Ethan realized the absurdity of the situation. A human, barely qualified in alien etiquette, had navigated a room that could have ended him, armed with only instinct, humor, and a growing sense of audacity. Liara's expression softened, though still tinged with playful authority. "The final step is the dinner itself. Presentation, flavor, and courage combined. You will dine with me, and I will judge not only your skill but your understanding." What? Ethan felt his stomach churn, not entirely from hunger. "Understanding," he echoed, "like cultural understanding, or like survival of the fittest understanding?" "Both," she said, a teasing glint in her pale green eyes. "And neither. You will learn in the moment." He laughed, leaning back slightly, trying to mask the mixture of fear and excitement. "Guess I'd better make a dessert that doesn't explode in my face." Liara's ears flicked with amusement. "Or one that does in moderation. Some chaos is necessary." The chapter drew to a close as Ethan, armed with alien knowledge, half-cooked ingredients, and a reckless sense of adventure, prepared to step into the dining hall. Humor had softened the tension, skill had built confidence, and a strange, budding camaraderie had formed between human and alien. He knew the dinner would be a test unlike anything he had faced, and yet, for the first time, he felt not only ready but strangely eager to see where this absurd, dangerous, and thrilling night would lead. Ethan stepped into the dining hall, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. The room was alive with subtle motion, walls pulsed with soft, golden light that shifted with the hum of the floor beneath his feet, and the ceiling displayed a rotating holographic nebula that made the stars seem close enough to touch. Tables floated midair, each gently adjusting to the height and comfort of its occupant, and subtle streams of luminescent energy curled through the air like quiet rivers of light. At the far end of the hall, Liara waited, her posture poised yet relaxed, the long ears angled slightly forward, catching the ambient glow like antennas tuned to his nerves. "Sit," she commanded, though the word sounded more like a suggestion framed in amusement than a strict order. Ethan carefully stepped onto a hovering chair, wobbling slightly before the subtle magnetic stabilizers locked him into place. The ingredients he had wrestled with, coaxed, and charmed earlier floated around him in small containers, now organized in neat clusters as if the room itself approved of his earlier efforts. Liara leaned against a wall, watching him with eyes that glittered with curiosity. "You have prepared for this moment," she said. "I am curious to see if your ingenuity can survive judgment." Ethan took a deep breath. "Judgment, huh? Well, I hope it's a constructive critique." He reached for the first dish, a floating orb of plasma fruit delicately balanced atop a crystalline lattice, As he presented it, the orb quivered slightly, pulsing in colors he had learned to interpret. Nervous, excited, proud, he held it out and Liara's eyes softened. "Interesting choice," she said, tilting her head. "The flavor must match the energy." She reached out and the orb gently settled onto a plate that shimmered into existence. Ethan realized he was holding his breath as she tasted it, but she only hummed in approval, a sound like wind through silver chimes. "Good," she said finally, "but balance is not only flavor, it is patience." "And you have patience, human." Ethan felt a warm flush of pride, though he coughed as one of the tiny floating spice crystals zapped his hand in playful warning. "Ow, patience is going well," he joked, holding up his singed finger. Liara's laugh, low and musical, echoed through the hall, carrying both amusement and approval. The next dish, the creativity test, floated forward, a strange, twisting assembly of bioluminescent vegetables and shimmering protein strands that he had somehow persuaded to cohere without rebelling violently. He presented it carefully, explaining its flavor profile in awkward but earnest language. Liara's long ears twitched in interest as she tasted, and Ethan saw her smile broaden slightly. "You have understood the essence of unpredictability," she said. "To create is to anticipate chaos and to embrace it. Few humans manage such harmony." Ethan blinked. "Harmony. I was mostly just trying not to burn the kitchen down." "Humor can be a form of understanding," she replied, flicking her ears as if to punctuate the point. "You understand me better than most who walk these halls." What? Then came the courage test. The ingredient, a luminescent orb with a faintly sentient hum, floated toward him, vibrating as if sensing his heartbeat. Ethan took a deep breath and spoke to it gently, whispering nonsense, telling jokes, even complimenting it on its fine aurora. The orb slowly coalesced into a stable form, glowing steadily, and he presented it to Liara with a flourish that made him feel ridiculous and triumphant all at once. "You have faced unpredictability and survived," Liara said, studying the orb. "You have risked failure and turned it into amusement. That is courage." Ethan grinned, leaning back. "So I pass." "What?" "For now," she said, the corner of her lips twitching in that rare, almost human expression of approval. "But the final judgment is more than skill or bravery. It is how you carry yourself when all eyes, all energies, all possibilities are upon you." "What?" He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Everything he had done, every misstep, every joke, every desperate moment of trying not to panic had brought him here. He realized that courage was not just survival, skill was not just precision, and humor was not just a defense. Together, they had formed a bridge between two worlds, human and alien, forged in mistakes and tempered by trust. Liara floated closer, her eyes locking with his. "You have shown respect, ingenuity, and levity. You are forgiven." "What?" Ethan blinked. "Forgiven?" he asked, the words sounding almost alien in his own mouth. "Do you not see?" she said, tilting her head, long ears catching the nebula light. "Forgiveness is not simply absence of punishment. It is acknowledgement of understanding. You have earned this through action, through wit, and through courage." A rush of relief and disbelief hit him all at once. He laughed, a sound that was partly hysteria, partly joy. "So I don't get eaten, zapped, or turned into intergalactic seasoning." "Not tonight," Liara said, her voice teasing yet sincere. "Perhaps another night," she added, and the faintest twinkle in her eyes suggested she might be joking. They sat together, sharing the fruits of his trials, exchanging stories between bites. Ethan told tales of human follies and misadventures, and Liara shared stories of alien bureaucracy, energy weapons that had their own opinions, and spices that required negotiation. Each laugh, each shared glance felt like a bond forming, not just between human and alien, but between two beings who had discovered that connection could exist even in the most unexpected places. By the end of the meal, Ethan realized how much he had changed. He had entered the armory terrified and reckless, relying on luck and charm to survive. He left it with skill, patience, and a sense of humor sharpened by challenge, and unexpectedly, a respect for the complexities of an alien world. He understood now that mistakes were not endpoints but opportunities, and that fear could be softened with curiosity, courage, and laughter. Liara stood and looked at him, long ears twitching in the ambient light. "You may leave," she said. "And perhaps return." Ethan stood, feeling lighter, braver, and somehow